Hi, families. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode. This is a bit of a trigger warning because this week's episode we are talking to a doula and birth photographer, and it is an episode geared towards doulas. And in this episode, we will be discussing possible trauma and loss that one might experience as part of the career of being a doula or birth photographer. And if you find yourself in a tender place, either in pregnancy or postpartum, or if those topics are just something that you're not comfortable listening to, please go ahead and skip this week's episode, and we'll see you next time. Take care of yourselves.
Yeah, it's their birth experience. It's not mine. Everybody has a budget. There's nothing wrong with having a budget. But just because they have a budget, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't have some kind of photos of them meeting their baby. And I think that's utter bullshit if other people have an issue with that.
Welcome to the Birth Education Center podcast, hosted by myself, Care Messer, an entrepreneur, birth educator, and doula. My team and I want to help you discover your options in birth and postpartum, how to find your voice, and how to use that voice to navigate our maternal healthcare system. You and your baby are not just a number. This information includes doulas too. Now let's get started. Welcome to the show today.
We are back with Jelina Sonnenberg, who, if you have been listening, you will have heard her birth stories and a few little teasers to her journey to becoming a doula and birth photographer. And we're here today to talk about that journey and her incredible career as a successful birth doula and birth photographer. Karen, I know firsthand just how amazing she is at her job because she has taken care of so many of our students before she left California forever. But she is just an incredible businesswoman, Renaissance woman. She really does it all. And she has turned her career, starting as a doula, into birth photography, into mentorship, into judging the birth photographer of the year competitions, into helping people cultivate their businesses.
She's good at what she does.
Understanding how to use the internet to your advantage and have a very strong public persona. And we're just really excited for her to share her journey with you guys and talk about how you too can be successful if you're thinking about getting into this business, and especially if you're thinking about adding photography in to your business as a birth worker. So excited to hear what she has to share with us today.
Welcome, Jelena.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Who else would we have? Because I don't know anything about photography. I know that I need to refer that out to you is what I need to do, but now I'm not in Illinois and you're not in California. So let's start off because I really want doulas to have kind of the full view, the nitty gritty, the beauty, and also the hard stuff about this part of the career path if you're adding birth photography to your doula work. When did that decision come to, I need to add this in and how I'm going to make this work?
It wasn't necessarily a decision. It kind of just fell in my lap. I kind of came in through the back door almost because I photographed a bereavement session. Baby had anencephaly. And when I got home and was editing photos, it was like, holy shit, I'm actually decent at this. I'm really enjoying editing the photos and doing that aspect of it. And it was, okay, I'm going to start doing this then. This is going to be an offering. And I hit the ground running.
And did you get training after that?
No, I was self-taught. So it was a lot of YouTube and scouring Facebook, birth photography, Facebook groups, and trial and error.
So that's something to note. Just because you're self-taught doesn't mean I took a picture and I fiddled around with it. It's tons of research, tons of education, copying, seeing how that works, redoing it, and finding what works well for you and how you know how to do that lighting. Because I know it's much harder than you think. And I've seen photography where it's self-taught, but there's been no research and stuff behind it. And they've charged a lot for it and the families have not been happy.
It's not just hitting a button.
It's definitely not just hitting it, especially in low lights at births.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what it means to be a doulatog? I feel like the first person I met who coined this phrase. I know you're not the originator of it
I was
probably,
not, but yeah.
you were the first time I ever heard someone call themselves a doula tog. And I just want to know a little bit more about what it means to serve as both doula and photographer in the birth space. And how do you feel like you fill both roles so that you feel like families aren't missing out on photographer or missing out on doula, and what that balance looks like for you when you're doing both in a birth room?
I know even before I added the photography aspect, I wrote a blog on it and I titled it, I'm a Bila, not a doula. So I'll be there with you, but I'm not going to do things for you. And the clients that hire me as a doula understand that I can do counter pressure and there will be things that I can do as a doula. But if you are wanting 100% that kind of physical comfort, that you need to hire someone else. There's a lot of talk in the doula spaces of people not wanting to offer it together because they feel that one side of it lacks and isn't given the amount of energy that they feel it should be given.
So to be clear, if you're being a doula tog with what you offer for your families, you are there to help guide and everything like that, but photos are your number one. And then when it's not intensive for whatever is going on in the birth space, you can help with hands-on comfort.
I mean, I will hold my camera and I will do counter pressure. There is a photo of me on Instagram where I have like a bed sheet wrapped around my arm and I'm holding my camera and my client is pushing. So there's ways that, yes, I do physical things for my clients, but it's one of those like, if you want double hip squeezes, I'm gonna have your partner do it.
Let the families dictate how much of each thing they want. So if a family said, we want a doula tog, we're going to pay the price, but our priority is the doula support, and then you take pictures whenever you have the opportunity, or we want pictures first, but if you're there to help us a little bit, that's great too. Does that ever like play into the conversations with families as you're getting ready to support their births?
It's difficult to say because I've had families ask, how do you do both? And there's births that I've been hired as the doula, photographer, and videographer. And it's difficult to describe until you're in it, until you experience it. Almost every single one of my doula photo video clients are like, I couldn't understand what you were saying, when it's like, you just have to experience it. But now I get it. Like on the other side, it's, oh no, I get it. So it's difficult because the way that I have advertised myself is the clients who come to me for my specific services are very confident in themselves and very confident in the birth process and don't necessarily need as much hands-on physical support as someone who isn't kind of where they're at in the confidence level.
Well, and I imagine too, if you're an experienced doula, you know what it takes to hold the space in that birth room. You know where the good places would be for videography and the right shot and stuff like that. And when you're a new doula, you don't know those places for the photography side, and you're still trying to figure out how to hold that space well and do comfort measures. So I can see how doula tog title and adding that to your services would be better for everyone involved if you had been in it for a while. For the clients, like much better, because you understand the whole process, the being on call, all of that it entails.
Well, and there's so much that goes in prenatally of setting expectations and making sure that they're properly educated and that they know what to expect, so that when we're in the birth space, they're not necessarily blindsided by things, so to speak.
So are your prenatals regular prenatals then? Or do you make sure that they've had a really good childbirth education and you just say, okay, you got your birth plan, you've got, so you can check off the list because they're so well informed?
It depends, because I've had clients who were confident and understood what they felt that they needed to understand about the birth, but didn't have necessarily out of hospital childbirth education classes. And they had the birth experience that they wanted. The prenatals are tailored to each client. And a lot of it is coming from your experience as a doula, of being able to read more into what they say, or like, hey, That's setting off a red flag. Let's talk about that more. Let's unpack this. So a lot of it is, hey, get really good at being one thing first before adding on something else.
That's probably the best advice you could give today.
Yeah, I love that. There's two big things there that you said. I think that it's a really good thing for doulas hearing this, or people thinking about starting out into doula work, that it sounds like you really got confident and comfortable in the birth space before you put a camera in your hand, to make sure that you understood how to move in the room, how to hold that space, how to be present without another piece to the puzzle. But then I also love the tailoring the prenatals to the client's care. You know, we preach that till we're blue in the face with doulas too. Having a set, this is how I always do things, is setting yourself up for failure, because we're people.
One size does not fit all.
Yeah, one size never fits all. You can't approach that in any area of life, but especially something as unique as birth. So I really love that you said that. I just think about myself, and when families ask me, like, can you pick up your phone and take pictures? And I'm always like, maybe. So it's just amazing to me that you are able to find that balance and prioritize that, as well as your support, because I just think about all the times that, like, oh my God, and all of a sudden we're pushing and I don't know where a phone is and no pictures got taken because a baby fell out. So I really admire that ability to balance those things.
And that's a question I have too, is when they hire you just for birth photography, they're hiring one person, that's you, and they know what you're doing. You're there as backup support. How do you not advocate when you see something off going on in the birth room? Are you just strictly the photographer with your mouth shut, or what do you do?
There's a lot of people who are like, if you're the photographer, you just be a fly on the wall and you don't say shit and you just stand there. And I am a super big proponent of, like, if you're in that birth room, you are part of their story and you have a duty to your clients to make sure that they're not being abused or coerced or anything like that. So there's things, again, prenatally, that I'll send my clients as, like, hey, do you have a doula? No, you don't. Okay, here are some handouts. Here's like a few websites. It's not necessarily like a thin line, but it's just one of those, here's a few things that will allow me to sleep a bit easier at night, knowing that you have some education, whereas I'm not burning myself out, just giving free stuff, so to speak. But yeah, no, if I see something amiss, I will say something. I'm not going to stand by.
It also says to who you are, because you don't keep your mouth shut. Like, I don't either.
I had a feeling when we were putting this together and I was thinking about questions to ask, I was like, is this a little bit too, we know what she's going to say when we talk about advocating. Jelena, being the fierce advocate and warrior for justice that she is, I have no doubt that if she saw something, she would be like, hold on, wait a second. Nope. And also, I caught you doing that on camera. Not to that extent, but just that I know that there's nothing that's going to happen to the families in Jelena's care that she would not step in and be that support or that advocate for them. But I wanted to hear her say it.
And I think it's good for new doulas to hear that, or maybe not new doulas, but doulas coming into birth photography. I like that idea. You are still part of their story. And if something amiss shows up, you would be amiss if you didn't say something, because we're talking about the birth of a baby and this happens one time. It's very sacred. And yeah, we don't mess with that. And if they're just hiring you as a doula and they're like, yeah, we can't afford the birth package, we just want you as a doula, but they think, she's a photographer, so we're going to get good shots. How do you handle that? You're like, whatever I can get on my iPhone, girl, but that's it. Like, how do those lines not get blurred?
I don't even use my iPhone. I use theirs.
Even better, because then there's no blurred lines there, because you can't even touch those up or anything.
Nope.
What's that conversation like? Because that's what they're thinking if they're like, I'm going to hire her, she's a photographer.
Yes, iPhones and other cameras have come a very, very long way. They don't hold a candle to the images that I specifically produce. It's fine with me. I'll use your phone.
Is that written on your website? Like, if I'm your doula, I'll snap pictures for you casually with your phone. So how does that conversation go?
They'll ask. At some point, it's typically in labor. Oh, can you just take a few photos? Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. If I'm looking at your website and I know you are a birth photographer as well as a doula, I see that I can't afford the photographer package. then I, in my brain, would think she's going to take freaking phenomenal photos anyways, because she's going to have an eye for it. So I'll just ask her if she can like snap photos with her phone or whatever. That never comes up in an interview or in a prenatal interview. Like, will you just take pictures with our phone? Or that never comes up?
Well, I'm sure it has, but like I said before, the photos that I take on their phone don't hold a candle to the photos that I produce with my camera, because I bounce flash. So I have a very specific style that their iPhone will not be able to recreate. So I don't have an issue, and this is for me personally, some others don't. I don't have an issue taking their phone and snapping a few photos. They're not getting professional photography, so to speak, but they still want photos. So yeah, I'll take photos. Like, you still want this moment to be captured, but you don't have the budget for professional photography, that's fine.
So you have no problem, like you said, some people might have an issue with it, but you don't have a problem as a doula taking off that photography hat and being like, I'm not a photographer in this moment. I'm your doula. I'm just your support person. And like all doulas, part of our role sometimes is to pick up the phone and take pictures. 'Cause I think maybe what you're getting at is some doula togs or some people who do both may feel like it undermines their photography to pick up a phone and take pictures, but it's not like they're using those pictures as like Jelina Sonnenberg photography. It's just like you said, capturing the moments of the birth, which I think as doulas, if that is one role that we can take on and make sure that some of these special moments get recorded or photographed, great. And it doesn't say anything negative about you as a photographer that maybe they couldn't afford it or they didn't want you to have a camera in your hand. They wanted your birth support, and that's what was priority to them. So you feel comfortable with that, saying, I'm taking off my photographer hat and I'm just going to be your doula, but I'll take pictures if I can with your phone.
Because like I said, the phone photos don't hold a candle to the images that I specifically produce.
It's literally not competition to what you do. Awesome.
That's exactly what I was going for. I think that so many things, competition seeps in. I'm sure you see it too, where photographers are very protective of their role, or doula togs are very protective of their role, and somehow feel like if they pick up the phone and take pictures, it doesn't represent them or something like that. And so I love to hear that you're willing to be flexible to what families need and all that.
Yeah, it's their birth experience. It's not mine. Everybody has a budget. There's nothing wrong with having a budget. But just because they have a budget, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't have some kind of photos of them meeting their baby. And I think that's utter bullshit if other people have an issue with that.
Oh, I love that.
And as doulas, we do snap photos all the time. So I've taken some amazing photos, not like your photos, but amazing photos for the moment with what was available, right?
My favorite thing about the phone is, my phone at least, is that they'll say, no video, you can't record video. And I'm like, I'm taking pictures, but I am taking pictures of the video that I'm taking on my phone because I'm not going to not record what they've asked me to record. And so, yeah, if I'm not fully holding a leg or whatever, capturing those moments for me is one of my favorite parts of the job. And even if it's with my phone, sending them the pictures afterwards and saying, look at all of these.
Also, you can totally hold a leg and still take photos.
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Yes, exactly. I was thinking more of those moments where it's like I have a leg and the puke bucket and where you're doing all the things and it's just not, my phone's over there. It's not happening. I'm sorry, guys.
We need a GoPro in this moment and it's not happening.
Exactly. Your kid's falling out. Priorities. Sorry. I think that's a really good segue, actually, you talking about what families can afford and how you can respect different families' boundaries in regards to what their investment's going to be. So when we're talking specifically about doula tog and then going even further into the photography side of it, can you talk about how you help parents understand the investment that they're making, both in the quality of the photos, but the time that this is labor intensive, not just in the way that you're present for the birth, however long you're there, which can be hours and hours, and you're on call leading up to it, but then you're taking the work home with you and continuing to work on the photos from that birth, and that can take however long depending on how many there are and how much tweaking you need to do and all of that. I want to know from that perspective how you share that with families, how you help them understand just how much of an investment it is on your part when you're talking to them about the financial investment you're making.
A lot of it is kind of liking it to wedding photography. Did you have your wedding photographed? Did you skimp out on your wedding photographer? And it's like, no, we got married. That's a big, important moment. So meeting your baby for the first time, a super big, important moment. Yeah. So why would you skimp out on that? But it's also one of those, again, everybody has a budget, and that's totally okay. There is someone for everyone's budget. The more experienced and the more quality the image is, the higher price you're going to pay. It's the same as wedding photographers. I think, and I know I have this on my website somewhere, that birth photography should be way more expensive than wedding photography because of our on-call time and whatnot. Photographers have a start time and an end time, and we don't. And they charge $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. But yeah, it all depends on what their budget is and who's around them. If they value birth photography, they're going to figure it out.
And do you offer different packages in terms of photography? I know you're like overhauling your website and all of that. Do you have different tiers, or what is your pricing structure for the investment that parents are making?
I have recently taken doula services off by itself. So that is only available as an add-on to birth photography. But I try and keep my packages as simple as possible. There's a birth photography package, a doula photo package, doula photo video package, and then there's like the other sessions.
What's the difference between the doula photo and the doula video package compared to just birth photography?
Birth photography, it's either birth photography or birth videography, one or the other, whichever one they want. Currently, where I'm sitting at, birth photography is $3,000. Doula tog services is $3,500. For birth photography and videography, for both of them, is $4,000. And then it just goes up from there.
Honestly, I don't think that's overpriced. For what you do,
It's not.
Well, and that's kind of what we're getting at, right? Is if we were to break down that, let's say the full package, $4,000, into the time spent preparing families, into the hours spent at the birth, at the bedside, especially when you're in that doula tog, like where you're doing both the support and the photography and videography, and then the hours afterwards that you are working on those photos and those videos and putting things together for the families, your hourly pay is very small for the effort and skill that you're bringing to the table. That I think you're right on. It's like, weddings are incredible, but we don't look at birth as the same type of experience.
You got an 8 or a 10-hour day.
Yeah, when versus potentially 24, 48 hours of supporting the family from the first, hey, I might be in labor call, having your phone on, not really sleeping. It's the stuff that we always talk about with doula work as well. Our investment, our effort starts in our home before we ever leave our house, that we are working for our families. And the same is true for doula togs. I think your pricing is, those numbers may sound big, but when you really talk about the investment that you're making yourself.
Well, and you also have to figure there's always those births where it's a fake labor call. And so you're rushing over and then it goes away. So you have to figure those in too, because you never know if those are going to happen. I shouldn't say fake labor. They're practice things like, ooh, I might, and then it's not. So it is a constant push-pull. Financial investment is just, yeah, you have to charge what you're worth and you have to get paid for what is sustainable for your family. And before I want to jump into the business aspect, because that's my favorite thing to talk about, but I want to talk about so I know the first one that you ever did was a bereavement session. There are some difficult births where they're traumatic, where it could be a loss. How do you bring those home and process that with those images in your face? Whereas when we leave, we have them in our mind, but we're not touching them up and moving through them. I just want other doulas that are thinking about this to understand the full scope of what this practice could be.
So it's actually easier for me when I have the photos to go through and edit them, because I can go through each moment in that birth and process it as I'm editing those photos.
Wow.
For me, it's more difficult to not have something tangible to work on and just kind of sitting and processing it with another person, another doula. which is a big reason why I took doula services by themselves off. Because especially here in the Midwest, there's a lot more trauma within the hospital system that happens. And for me and the sustainability of my business, I made the decision to, if I'm going to be in a birth space, I'm going to have those photos afterwards to help me process whatever has happened.
It's really interesting. It's something I didn't really think about, but I could imagine sitting with those moments when things didn't go as planned or you had a hard birth or something like that would really put together a very clear timeline for you versus when we're relying only on our memory. We're often probably second guessing ourselves. What happened first? Where was I in this moment? And knowing where you were in the room because of the perspective of the camera and seeing things in the order in which they happened, I can imagine is actually a really helpful tool to be able to go back through these births and process your role and think about how you're going to share things with the family, talk to the family about how things unfolded and stuff. So yeah, that's a perspective I didn't really think about. But now that you mention it, I guess I'm a person that when something hard happens, I'm like, oh, it's going to be a long time before I look at the pictures from that day. But as you're talking about it, it makes a lot of sense to me in terms of all the what ifs that we ask ourselves when we leave a hard birth as a doula. It leaves a lot more clarity, I would imagine.
It makes me sad. We have enough trauma on the West Coast that it makes me sad that you feel like from what you've witnessed in the Midwest, it's even worse because ours is enough. And we've got to start making some changes in this freaking country because women should be able to give birth in a very peaceful manner without being bullied.
And it doesn't make the hospitals money.
Right. And I had a very big wave of sadness when you said that. So I must be feeling what you're feeling.
We think about too the population in these states that we live in for the most part, you being in California, me being in Oregon, and these densely populated areas with lots of hospitals available. And there's been a huge push in the area I'm in Portland, where these hospitals are all sort of playing on a level playing field of competition to make sure that families are having their needs met. I think back to where I was born. I was born in the Midwest. I was born in not a super small town in North Dakota, but small enough that there's one hospital.
We have two.
Yeah, you have two. There was one. So what birth options? And if it's the one doctor or two doctors that everybody sees because that's all that's available, how do you avoid trauma? How do you make space for your baby and hold space for your baby and create a beautiful birth experience when there's one place to have a baby? And I remember too, in North Dakota, I know that there for a while was like one midwife who traveled around the whole state doing home births because that's all there was in the entire state of North Dakota. And this one hospital, there's basically one hospital per city, and the cities are hours apart from each other. And it creates these maternity care deserts. And it definitely makes me grateful for, even though, you know, of course, we have hard births. We have hard births in California. We have hard births in Oregon. And it's not good all the time. But access is the privilege that we have here on the West Coast. Access to options is for sure the privilege that we have on the West Coast. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's something that getting into this, I didn't even think about that additional layer.
We're going to definitely send some big thoughts for education and getting a doula and staying home longer before you go to your one hospital available, because the way you're going to be advocating for yourself in those situations has got to be on point for real.
Yep.
Okay. Switching gears, lightening the mood a little bit. Let's go into more of the business aspect. When you're just starting out, obviously you've got to get a portfolio going and have things for people to look at. How are you going to price that as a newer photographer? What would your advice be on how to do that? You're kind of in the same mindset as us. We are very transparent with our prices. They are everywhere. We don't hide costs, because if you hide money, that's just a sickening thing to start off a beautiful relationship that you need trust with. So we are very open with money. So let's talk money and time, investment, and all that kind of stuff in how to get this started.
The easiest thing that most photographers who want to start photographing births is model calls. And there's in the photography / fashion world, model call is, there's a whole bunch of bureaucratic bullshit that goes along with that. But it is essentially looking for someone in exchange for a discount in using their images. I always recommend, whatever you're doing, to have your end goal pricing, whatever you want to charge, have it on your website. And then from there, give them a discount. And then as you build your portfolio, you can decrease the discount until you're at your full pricing.
So if your full pricing is $4,000 and you're building your portfolio, then you would put $4,000, 70% discount on maybe the first 5-6 births. And those would be model call births to build your portfolio. And then after you do those 5, it might be a 50% discount for the next 5 births as you're getting more experience. But the $4,000 is still on that website with a / discount as you take those births, and then you take those ones off, and then you up it to the 30% discount or whatever it is. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So when people go to your website, they know how much your pricing will be. There's not going to be oh, you only charged me $1,200 last time. Why is it $3,800 this time? And it's, well, no, you got a discount last time because I was building my portfolio. This is how much I cost now.
That's brilliant. For one, it takes the money sting out of you going, ooh, am I worth it? You already know what you're going to be charging and you move towards it, which I think is easier. Doulas should almost do that.
They should.
That's almost easier to know. And I think I did that in the early days. Every time I got an education, I would up it by $50, or every time I had 10 births, I would up it by $50. But that's brilliant to have it on your website. My next question too is, you're just like me, big on SEO and figuring out that website to get more traffic onto it. How do you put the effort into your website with the birth photography to build that traffic besides networking and being known in the doula circles and photography circles? What kind of education are you putting towards your website to get more foot traffic onto your website?
As photographers, it's definitely easier for us to have that emotional aspect to pull people into the website because we have and we use our photos that we take. We don't have to purchase a commercial license from another photographer to use their images on our website. And there's a lot of free resources regarding SEO and keywords and whatnot. And then there's a lot of paid resources. For me, I think I've taken one marketing course and then I took one SEO course, and the rest has just been Googling, what do you do for SEO? How are you supposed to help it? And then a lot of it is trial and error, seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. Most people don't realize that SEO isn't an overnight thing. It's a good 3 to 6 months of waiting and seeing if what you did is successful and you're ranking on the first page of Google.
And I think people would be really surprised if they saw my TikTok feed or my Instagram feed, because it is following all of those business gurus who, here's what I'm doing for this and here's what I'm doing for that and here's the new trend on Instagram. It is such a constant thing that I work on. It's just part of what I do during the day. Because that algorithm changes all the time, sometimes I feel like, do I work for Zuckerberg? Like, what the F is this? But it is that constant learning from people who run SEO sites and help other families and other businesses do what they do, to constantly tweaking. And it's key for a successful website nowadays, because people come to what's on the top. And if you don't know how to get on the top, besides the networking, besides the getting the referrals, besides the getting the Google rankings, Yelp rankings, whatever that is, you really do need to put some time. Even if you can't invest in it monetarily, there are people you can learn from to invest time-wise to get that website up and going and continually changing with the algorithms.
Yep. Google.
Are there any other business aspects that you think newer birth photographers should know about, or ways to get the word out of what they're doing, etc.?
The biggest thing that newer birth photographers and even newer birth doulas should focus on is building those relationships.
Agreed.
And yes, networking, but building those relationships, because the clients will come. The clients will come later. You have to have those relationships and friendships first.
Absolutely. Give up the competition. Like attracts like. And if you have people that work together well, they network well, you're right. Like attracts like, and those kind of families will show up.
And I think that all three of us could speak to the fact that what you get out of building those relationships is more than just clients, right? It's friendships, it's advocates for you, it's shoulders to cry on, it's sage advice, it's even when you move across the country from each other, it's somebody that you could be like, oh my God, I need you to just hear this for me, okay? I need to just say this to somebody, even if it's in a text message, that the relationships can be so much more than just business leads and just increasing your client load if you open yourself up to it. And I know that I am blessed by knowing both of you and the other people that have joined our circle over the years. And so be open to it. I love that that's your advice, because really connection is everything. If there's a phrase you're going to hear 100,000 times on this podcast, it's connection is everything. Yep. Even when it comes back to building your business, especially when it comes to building your business. That leads me into advice, right? So that's a great kickoff to what are the important things that you think burgeoning birth photographers and doulas should know, doulas who are thinking about adding birth photography in, birth photographers who are thinking about getting into the birth space. I think photographers who shoot other things that are thinking, oh, maybe now I want to get into birth. I just had a baby. What advice do you have for people who want to jump into this very specific niche type of photography for families?
First thing is charge sustainably from the gate. Do not let anybody dictate what you should be charging, because you need to feed yourself and pay your bills and charge sustainably. Birth workers have like a 2-year typically burnout rate.
If that.
This is gonna not necessarily ruffle some feathers, but most people don't think about it. And I feel like they need to. Trigger warning death is you need to be prepared for your client and or their baby to die, especially in the US healthcare system and this increasing maternal mortality rate. That is something that many people don't realize. And yes, it's sad, but it's a reality.
Can I actually add on to that a little bit? I think that that's something that CARE also does a really good job of talking to new doulas about, and something that CARE and I feel very strongly about. And it's not just death, right? It's trauma too. I think that becoming a doula is a very cute idea, right? Supporting people, it's cute babies, having babies. And this is something that CARE and I have really grown into even more over the last 10 years of recognizing just how serious birth is, how political birth is, and how much difficulty there is in supporting birth, especially in the US healthcare system. So I'm really glad you said that, because it can be hard, it can be traumatizing, and there can absolutely be loss. And so, yes, I think anybody who's thinking about getting into birth work has to face that. And I think down the line, we're going to have to be doing, unfortunately, more episodes about how to handle trauma as it comes up in the birth space. And I think that being one of your first pieces of advice and being realistic about it and being honest about it is really important for people who are thinking about getting into this space.
And it might also be really good for those birth photographers to talk to doulas and midwives about the downsides. What are the possibilities? What things could I see? And take some advocacy training. Understand how fucked this medical system is that we're birthing in and what we're trying to prevent, and also trying to educate ahead of time. Because if you're seeing a family that is just a deer in the headlights and they have no clue and they just want their beautiful birth filmed and they have no education, no understanding of their hospital cesarean rate, no understanding of the seeds that have been planted for induction or whatever going on in their birth appointments, you're going to see some stuff, because they're going to be facing some stuff. And which is one of the reasons we don't take people that aren't educated, right? They have to have a foundation so we can build off that in a birth room. Makes a huge difference. But I can see how a birth photographer might have one birth and be done because she's so caught off guard. So good advice.
It's what you had said earlier, Ashley, of connection. We cannot do this alone. It is 100% community over competition, because if you have a traumatic birth and you need to call someone at 2 a.m., you need to know who you can call and talk to process a birth. If you're not a photographer who is able to process it through those images, birth work cannot be done alone at all.
Absolutely agree. Community is everything when it comes to birth work. And birth photographers, because see, I'm not in those groups, but are the birth photography groups that are for support, are they national? Are they specific to the state?
And most of them are international.
International. Interesting. When you're looking at those groups, when you're looking at the longevity of the people who are still in those groups, do they get out of birth work but still stay in that group? Or are there some birth photographers that are lasting? And how are they doing that?
It's both. There's some who are still photographing births and have been for 10 plus years. I know of birth photographers who have stepped away from births, who are still in the groups. There's some of us who photograph births, but also offer mentorships and whatnot, and like education on the birth side. It's a little bit of everything in those groups.
And would you say, if I'm a novice, I've never done any birth photography, what kind of training should I take? Like photography wise, should I go to the community college and start taking some classes ahead of time? What would you say to prepare me if I literally have no clue what I'm doing? Obviously, you're self-taught and you're brilliant. That's not me. So I don't know what aperture is and all those things. Like I see it on my camera and I'm like, those are big words. Ashley will know what those mean. I don't. So where would I start if I was brand new?
If you were brand new, learn how to use your camera and manual. That's where you start, and understanding the triangle of light and the limitations of your camera. Because we know birth spaces range from the whole gamut of the super intense spotlight right on a freaking vulva or on a belly to damn near darkness. So it's understanding your camera inside and out, which, hey, there's a lot on YouTube for free.
That's good. And lighting is everything when it comes to taking a good photograph.
And all three of us can speak to the fact that babies are super disrespectful of the quality lighting that we need. There's no golden hour. There's no morning light birth. Rarely, if ever, is there sunlight involved in a birth process. It's 4 a.m. The sun's coming up after the pictures are already taken. Like maybe we get those newborn pictures, fresh, wet baby in the daylight. But other than that, so yeah, getting comfortable using your camera in the pitch black, basically.
Yeah, especially for like new photographers. There's a lot of people who are like, oh, you have to get a full framing, like you have to spend all of this money. And it's like, cool, if you're privileged enough to have just 10 grand laying around, sweet, go spend it. If you can't, use what you have. This is gonna ruffle some feathers, but I don't really care. If all you have right now is your phone, don't market yourself as a professional photographer, but use your phone to understand lighting situations and angles and use what you have. And then when you're able to save up money, buy whatever camera you can get and work from there. I'm a big proponent of free resources, of do what you can with as little money, get creative, like.
Totally on board with that. Like I think about all the things that people recommended buying when I first started as a doula. You need a rolling suitcase, and you need a TENS unit, and you need a this, that, and the other thing that you don't need. Plus, it's like, if you don't know anything and you are like, what even camera do I buy? How are you going to know if you don't educate yourself and do research to decide where you're going to make that investment, right? Especially if you're working with a limited budget. If you're a doula, you already don't make enough money.
This is why you charge sustainably.
Exactly. To be paying for a very expensive camera that may end up not working for you. Yeah, I think using those free resources available to you before you make a huge investment. Same with like, I'm sure do so many episodes talking about doula bags and stuff like that, but it's okay when you're first starting out to use what you have around the house in your doula bag. Right? You don't need to go out and buy a bunch of stuff just because you did a doula training and they said you need to buy all these things, right? Think about your investment you're investing in what you need and the quality that you need, not spending money just to spend money. So I love that. All the free things. And there's so many great things out there that will make you like a more sustainable photographer, doula, everything, if you look for it.
The reason I say that is because if you go and spend $3,000 on a camera because all of these people recommended it, and you figured out, oh, I don't want to do birth photography, then you're stuck with this $3,000 camera. And it's like, no, you want to make sure that this is something that you want to do long-term, so to speak. That birth photography is really something that you want to invest in, because not only is it an investment for your clients to make within you, but it's an investment that you need to make within yourself. So start out with whatever you have free, make sure that it's something you want to do, and then build on that.
I think that's the best way to end this episode, because don't overspend, invest in yourself and your learning and education, and you're going to be great for these families.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for being here today, Jelena. And we can find you in the show notes below, but tell us a little bit about, I know you do mentorship and stuff like that if they want to reach out. So how do they find you?
You can find me at jelinasonnenberg.com. or on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok at Gilded Reclamation. And yeah, I offer mentorship, SEO, all the fun stuff.
All right. It's a good resource. Please take advantage of it. We'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today. And remember, it's your body, your choice, and finding your voice is your power. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us in all the places, and go to birtheducationcenter.com for our blog and more online education classes. And we'll see you next week.